in relationship to preventive conservation measures that we take in museums, especially in traveling exhibits. And those are measures that we can do that are relatively simple to mitigate against damage so that we don't have to go to the next step and have a conservator treat an object if it's been damaged. And preventive conservation seems like a new concept, but it's an ancient tradition. In ancient Mesopotamia, they protected clay tablets in their storage by putting gutters in the floor and having water flow through the storage so that it would humidify the space. And in some cultures, they interleave textiles with specific plant leaves to mitigate against pests. So it's nothing new, it's just that we have new technologies and new materials to use today. So the three main ways that we can control damage to art objects are through building features, portable fittings, and procedures. So building features would be things like windows and doors and air conditioning units. Portable fittings would be things like display cases. And procedures are things like no food or beverages in the galleries. So,
do we have a humidifier in our museum?
We do have climate control in the museum, and it's monitored 24/7, and we try to maintain it around. The ideal for like the highest class collection is Class A collection, and that's like 70-50 with minimal fluctuations. And that would be very hard to maintain here in Jackson.
So is that 70 degrees, 50% humidity?
Yes. And so we drop it to between 40 and 45% relative humidity. Here's a chart that shows the temperature and relative humidity in Jackson is this wide swinging line, and
That's not right.
the museum controls the gallery to this temperature around 70 and 40 to 45%. That's the red line, and it's easier to see on this chart right here. And those are parameters that are established by not just the profession, but also by lender contracts. So we are asked to produce these charts to verify the climate in these galleries because of those requirements, especially for bronze and some of the papers on paper. We have a small monitor here. That's an analog monitor that doesn't record. And then we have a monitor in the wall in the other room. And it changes every 30 seconds from temperature to relative. And that's this monitor here. And then we download the data and work with a program on the web to produce the charts and to analyze if there was a power outage. We would see a wide swing in the graph. And this is one of the old monitors. It might be 30 years old. And this one we would have to change the paper manually and change the ink and not be able to send the chart as easily to lenders. So we're moving towards that kind of system.
Does the museum have a backup generator?
Not at this point, but we are working on it.
Right.
It's in our plan.
So that incorrect temperature and incorrect relative humidity are two of the 10 agents of deterioration or change that we try to control in the museum. And here you can see that, like this little birch bark with watercolor, that would be susceptible to damage from this, especially from dryness. It would be brittle, and works on paper could become brittle. Another thing that we are concerned about is physical force, and so during transit, the works are put into crates like this one that are well insulated to reduce vibration and also to buffer against changes in the climate. And so in this case, this one has got a small gasket on the side and foam to buffer it. And the plywood is it's heat treated so that it doesn't carry pests from one venue to another, especially to meet international laws. And I made another chart. This one shows the transit from Memphis to Boston, and the peak of the chart shows the point at which the crate was offloaded from the truck. So,
no kidding.
And so that is the most vulnerable point in any transit, is when anything is being handled. So we hire air ride vehicles, we protect it with objects with crates like this, and we try to slow the process down at the loading dock so that there's the minimal vibration and the minimal shift in the crate. And still, here we had 20 Gs. At 100 Gs, that's the Earth's gravity, causes the vibration to intensify 10 times. And so if there's a painting that has any kind of flaking paint or losses, that is not feeling 100 Gs, it's feeling 10 times that. So there's lots of reasons to, actually it's 100 times when I look at my notes. So there's lots of reasons to do these things while it's in transit. And then when we have things in the museum, when we're moving objects in the building on carts, we'll use special wheels and some kind of padding and support to protect it so that there's a buffer between the wheel movement and the piece itself.
No wonder people are hesitant to loan their art.
And when we do have loans, they come with all sorts of strings attached, and to the loan agreement, and those include light levels in temperature and relative humidity, but they also each piece comes with its own condition report, and we're tracking the history of the object on each of these condition reports, not just for insurance and to detect, immediate damage, but also so that from one venue to the next we can make changes if we notice something has happened. So this is a condition report from Denver for this painting, and you can see every little crack, every lift of the paint, everything is documented on visually and also in a narrative. This one is a little bit different, and it's for one of the paintings in the other room. But it notes pinholes that may have happened at Charlie Russell's time. It notes tears, creases, every detail is documented. Then some institutions will require display cases like these and those, not just to buffer the climate, especially for bronzes, but also to protect against theft because the objects are so small. So then, let's see.
How often do you update a condition report? Not until it goes somewhere or something comes?
Usually if something comes in or goes out, we do a condition report. And then from time to time there would be a conservation survey where we would survey and do condition reports on certain segments of a collection. So another agent of change or deterioration is called disassociation. And Bronwyn's going to show us a little video about collections, rationalization, and disassociation.
Welcome to the Anglian Museum of Cups and Saucers. Its mission is to collect, conserve, safeguard, exhibit and interpret cups and saucers for the people of East Anglia. The museum aims to ensure that the public have the widest possible access to the Anglian Cup and Saucer collection through displays, events, activities and educational work. The mission of the museum has informed its collecting policy and it has, oh dear, hang on. It seems that perhaps the collecting policy hasn't been stuck to quite as rigorously as it might have. Is that a tea bag display I see in there? So, it appears over the years the Cup and Saucer Museum has perhaps collected items that might at one time have been considered relative to the collecting aims of the museum. But clearly now the time has come to review the collection and maybe even dispose of some of them. No, wait, stop. You can't do that. Rationalising a museum collection is not solely about disposal. It's not a quick fix to clear space and raise money. It's about refining collections, making them more accessible, and making the museum more effective. It's really all about public benefit. Like all collections management, rationalisation needs a measured, structured approach. Indeed, an accredited museum needs to set out its approach to rationalisation in order to fulfil the requirements to the revised standard. A good place to start is by developing a policy statement. That should contain the museum's mission statement, a definition of rationalisation, and an outline set of principles is also a good thing. Of course, to guide you with this policy statement, there's the Museum Code of Ethics, the Museums Association's Disposal Toolkit, and the Share Museums East's Planning for Action report. To move forward with rationalisation, a museum needs to have an overview of its collections. A simple spreadsheet is fine. And an overview of the potential each collection has for rationalisation. And it needs a process for assessing collections. Each object or group of objects could be considered in the following ways. First of all, think about relevance. Does it relate to the collecting policy of the museum? Quality. Is the item a good example of its kind? Duplication. Is it one of many examples of its kind in the collection? Condition. Is it in a decent state of repair? Are there health and safety issues to consider, such as asbestos, mercury, or harmful chemicals? Ownership. Does the museum actually own the object, or is it on loan? And of course, size. Is the object taking up more space than it's worth? So, through careful assessment, you can reach a decision on the best option for each item. Allocating items of different use within the museum, such as set dressing or handling collection. Returning loaned items to their origins. Perhaps even recalling items on loan from other organisations. Converting loans to the museum to gifts to the museum. Disposal of items by gifting to another accredited museum, or if that's not possible, to other organisations or individuals. Disposal by sale to another accredited museum, or again, if that's not possible, to other organisations or individuals. Disposal by recycling. And, in cases where no other option exists, disposal by full or partial destruction. It's safe to say collections rationalisation does not happen overnight. It can take years and should be linked to the museum's overall forward plan. So, the Anglian Museum of Cups and Saucers has a mission. The mission of the museum has informed its collecting policy, and it has stuck rigorously to curating only items pertaining to cups and saucers from East Anglia. It is now one of the most coherent collections in the country. Its rich displays, friendly environment, and exclusive visits to its fascinating stores make it one of our most visited and best loved museums.
We've had a program, been using a collections management system, IO, for many years, and now we're updating it to TMS. And so we will be working in new ways to plan exhibits and to document the history of the object. So instead of a handwritten condition report, we'll be able to enter the condition report right into TMS, and then it will produce a report that we can send with the objects when they go on loan. We can produce exhibit labels right from reports in TMS, and start tracking location histories and other information. And there's going to be a lot of data entry involved in populating records, but it's a good development.
Is that like Argus?
It is, a little bit, yeah. And some of the things that happen in terms of dissociation, sometimes it's accidental. We tag everything that comes into the building and a tag falls off. Or somebody transposes a number and then we can't find it because we're looking for the wrong number. Or someone accidentally...
Dissociation just means there's a break between the object and its record.
Yes,
okay.
and its history. And it becomes really important because you would not want to lose track of the donor or the artist. And if something loses its number, you might, in essence, lose that information. So a lot of what we do is track movement in the building or outside the building. The next couple of items would be fire, water, pests, and pollutants. For fire, we follow international fire code here, and that is that we don't use torches or live fire in the building or outside, especially because we're on a grassy slope, and there have been issues in the past and fire alerts in town, and we just have to abide by those rules. If we were to have a fire, it's a good idea for volunteers to know how to use a fire extinguisher and contact staff immediately and all of those kinds of logical steps. But if we did have a fire, it could damage objects in the sense that they could have smoke or scorched places, and they could be beyond repair. And with water, we would be afraid of accidental discharge of the fire suppression system that could flood the building, or floods from the basement. And with pests, we're asking everyone to take an integrated pest management approach, where we try to identify damaging pests to mostly organic objects, and we use traps or if we do see something that has potential pests, we treat the object with anoxia, which is suffocating it. And so there are 12 basic museum pests that are most damaging, and if anyone wants a sheet with the dirty dozen, I can provide that.
So I have a question about the anoxia. So when you put things in that bag
Yeah.
to treat it that way, is it just a sealed bag, or is there something else inside that bag that sucks out the oxygen?
It's it's a bag that also has an oxygen scavenger in it.
Okay.
So so that's what causes it.
So it's not
The
just
larvae and the eggs to expire, and the time it takes to treat something is 28 days, and that's based on their life cycle. And other things that we can do here to avoid bringing pests into the building would be closing the doors and not bringing food and beverages into many spaces, keeping them contained in a break room, or garbage should definitely stay in the food area of the kitchen, things like that. And with pollutants, there are atmospheric pollutants like ozone and sulfur dioxide, and that also can be damaging. But we also test materials to use in proximity with collections, and if it has acetic acid or if it has any other harmful chemicals, then we avoid putting it in the same case or in proximity to the collection. Chemicals or those other atmospheric pollutants can cause staining, or, as you know, with silver, it can corrode silver or bronze. So those are mainly the main points, except that I also brought these out just to show. In the paintings, you see a few of these pipe bags in paintings. And this one is from 1885, and I think this one is a little bit older, but I'm not sure. And both of them are organic objects that would be very vulnerable to pests if they were to find them. A lot of times you can find evidence of a visit from an insect inside of the beadwork, so below the loops. Or you can see holes in the hide. This one has more damage from being in incorrect relative humidity. It's cracked and it's stiff, and all of this is stiff and dry. So if a conservator were to treat this would all be relaxed and it would be flat like this.
What would the treatment be?
They would humidify it, but very slowly.
Oh.
And the last stage of change is light, and Ron's going to talk about.
Did you do thieves and vandals?
Thieves and vandals with small things in display cases, and observing people to make sure they're not walking away with anything.
So touching and light are the next ones.
Yes, touching are on exhibit. Unfortunately, unsupervised children can run rampant and do a lot of damage without really trying. All you have to do is look at like the front door to the museum, the glass on the front door of the museum, and if you look close enough, what do you see? You see fingerprints. Every time you touch something, it leaves some residue behind. And some people actually have slightly acidic sweat, and which can be very harmful. But just the mere aspect of touching something, you're leaving a little bit of an oily substance that can attract dust and cause further problems with cleaning and maintaining. The acidic nature of the sweat can also actually ruin a patina. On the Climber revolver that's on display, the Colt revolver that's on display in the case back there, at one time the gun was handled, probably when John had it, by him or a friend, and it wasn't wiped down before it was put away. And on the back side of the gun, there's actually a fingerprint etched into the case hardening, which is a different form of bluing. If you look at the sculpture, the Orglum sculpture up there that's on loan to us, you look at the noses, the leading edge of the horses, you see all the patina loss that can happen just by repeated touching on a sculpture. That's a real good example of what can happen. A patina is just a microscopically thin surface layer on the bronze, or in the case of a gun, on the steel. Bluing is the same thing basically as a patina on a gun. So that's why touching can cause harm, especially over time. One person touches and says, "Oh, it's just me, what harm is going to happen?" But subsequently more people feel the same way, and and the things get touched. So the sign up front says that we ask people to stay at least 12 inches away from the artwork. We may actually change that to say 24 inches away from the artwork. It's fortunate that some pieces are protected with glazing. You hate to see glass on a painting, but with today's technology and the new glass, you can't even tell that piece has a piece of glass on it. Another dangerous thing too about people are these things. You see people walking through the museum taking these things and spinning them. If the lanyard were to break, that thing would go flying. If they were too close to a sculpture and they didn't realize it was right next to them, they could whack the sculpture. Same thing with a painting. The brochures that people carry around with them. A lot of people will go up to a painting and they'll say, "Oh, look at that bear's head there," and they'll be just right like that. And I'm only getting this close because there's glass on this painting. But people do that with open paintings. The Lancier painting in the other room over there, one day we noticed that it was missing several chips of paint. So something had to come in contact with the surface of that painting. And it's since been fixed, but I wish there were more volunteers here to get the message. We don't have the luxury of a security guard in every gallery like some big institutions do, and they help to keep things safe. The artwork safe and the people safe from the artwork as well. But when you see somebody that is too close, you think is too close to a painting, there's polite ways to ask them to please keep their distance. Just last week I saw somebody an inch away from the Bateman painting in the back hallway back there with a little handheld loop, and they were like an inch away from the painting, and they could have very easily fell into the painting, or their hand could have moved and caused damage to the painting. So it's important that as we go through the galleries and we see people that are doing things that just aren't right, to politely ask them to stay a little further away from the painting or the sculpture. And Dawn had mentioned the security aspect and the covered sculptures and whatnot, and it not only protects them from the security aspect, but it also protects them from a touching aspect. There are some sculptures in the collection that have a very fragile patina that can scratch very easily. Kids, when we have first Sundays, kids are eating cookies and whatnot up front, and they aren't washing their hands, but all of a sudden they come running rampant through the museum unsupervised and touching things, leaving food residue and sweat residue on artworks. So it's a good thing just to let the visitor know that they should help us protect the artwork. I think is there something else I was supposed to cover here?
Light.
Oh,
That's in the other room.
Yeah, the light, I can go into the other room because I have the light meter in the other room, and we're going to go over black light there as well. So, whatever. Are we going to move over there now?
Yes.
While we're in here, can I just mention one thing about light? That usually the comfortable place to see an object is 50 lux. And with dark painting or finely detailed painting, or with age, each time, each one of those conditions, you multiply it by 3. So 50 lux for an older person times 3 is 150 lux. That would be 15-foot candles, which would be about the light that's on this painting here. And so each time it multiplies. So it's hard to balance the visible light and the light that you need to protect the art. But that you can see in here, some of the darker areas of the gallery are around 50 lux. That would be 150. So just while we're in here.
Does light deteriorate oil paint?
It can cause chemical deterioration. Yeah. But Ron will talk more about that.
Well, and what it can, you don't want to say an oil or acrylic painting is bulletproof. They can withstand an awful lot. But the primary support, what that painting is on, can many times be affected. The canvas can be affected by light. Even though the canvas is covered, with paint, light does get through. It's especially important with, the primary support of all these pieces is paper. And paper is very susceptible to visible light damage and especially UV. All the light fixtures throughout the galleries have a UV screen on them because we use a par halogen light, and the halogen emits an awful lot of UV. So, and the advantage of that type of glass, the new glass I was talking about, museum type glass, not only is it anti-reflective and you can't see it when you're straight on, but it also blocks out anywhere from 98 to 100% of the UV on the works. So it's for our collection, we have an awful lot of fragile works. The Charles Livingston bowl that's over there at the end of the hallway with the Odd Couple, for example, none of those have UV glass, not even the simplest UV glass. And it's something that would cost tens of thousands of dollars for us to do just to replace all of our glass, because I think none of our Bodmers, none of our Catlins, because those were all received early. Those were all before UV glass really became into vogue. Same thing with acidic matting. We have pieces in the collection that were framed during the 50s, 60s, maybe even before. And back then, most of your matting was acidic. It was never even thought of that matting could be harmful to that work on paper. What happens when you have something encased in a frame? It's kind of like a little closed environment in there. You have a piece of glass in the front, and you have a barrier on the back. And unfortunately, on a lot of older pieces, that barrier is a brown paper, which is acidic itself. So we also endeavor to change backings when we can with a breathable material. We actually use Tyvek, which is used as a house wrap, because it allows off-gassing of harmful materials. But what can happen with a sealed piece is if something acidic is in there, all those acids can build up within that piece and affect everything around it. So if you have acidic matting, it can actually turn the primary support of that letter, the paper itself, into, it can make it acidic. And then over, decades, it'll slowly deteriorate. You see what happens to a newspaper when you leave it on the back window of your car, how quickly it turns brown. Newsprint is very cheap paper, and there's so much acid in it. And so what you're seeing is the UV from the sun hitting it, just quickly, making that paper deteriorate. And you leave it there long enough, it'll turn brittle. It'll just, it'll become friable. So that's the important thing about the right materials, within a housing of a piece. And light can exacerbate, any of those situations. So too much light, especially. So we want to move and show you a repaired painting. Okay, Carmen, our painting conservator, wasn't able to tell me exactly why, but paint of different ages fluoresces differently under a black light or an ultraviolet light. A lot of us older people will remember them as a lot of us older folks will remember them as black lights. that were used to light, bring out certain pigments in posters and whatnot. Jimi Hendrix posters and whatnot. You had them under a black light, and they would just light up all on their own. What a black light shows, though, on a painting that's had any kind of work done to it in its history, the different ages of paint will fluoresce differently. And this is a William Jacob Hayes painting, and if I had looked, I could tell you how old this painting was. But Adam, do you know how old this painting is, roughly?
100 and something, 25 years old.
What you can see here, up in the sky area, and especially along the edges, all these different patches that show up when you show the black light, especially up there in the upper right-hand corner. When you get to your darker pigments, those don't show up as drastically. You can see a spot there. There's I think there was a spot down here. This painting was on loan. There it is right here. You can barely see it because it's got dark paint around the background. But if you look at all of that under black light, and then you look at it under regular light, you go up to look at it, you don't see any of that different coloration. That's because the different age of the paint makes it fluoresce differently. So in this painting, that little hole that I showed you down here was on loan, and somehow another painting fell into it while I was at a different institution. So the other ones are just things that happen when a painting is in a frame and it's not handled properly and it's been in there for a long time and it's loose. All that edge work that you saw is just regular conservation, to repair any damage that was done to the painting throughout the course of its life, getting taken in and out of frames.
So the dark
cracks.
spots are newer paint that's been used to
Yes, exactly.
conserve it.
Conserve it. Sometimes what will happen if a painting is mishandled, the cracks will happen in the surface of the paint, and improper environmental conditions, will cause paint to release from the canvas. And a conservator will actually determine which areas need work, which could be troublesome, where the paint could actually fall off the canvas, and they will re-glue the paint back down to the canvas, and then fill in any areas with the paint that will match, so you can't really see.
So the dark spots are not the glue we're seeing; it's actually the paint.
It's actually the paint. And conservators nowadays as that all goes on in time. In the old days, people used to just fix things with whatever seemed proper. Nowadays, conservators make sure that whatever they do is easily reversible, so that if a better way comes in the future to fix it, the old stuff can be easily removed, and then the proper stuff can be put on. But I think that technology for now has advanced to the point where what they're using today is good. It's not like the Sistine Chapel or some of the older Michelangelo works and stuff like that were very poorly repaired. And it was very difficult, time-consuming, expensive for today's conservators to remove those old repairs to make it right, so that it wouldn't deteriorate further. Some of the materials that were used in cases like that were actually materials that over the course of decades and centuries were deleterious for the piece itself. So even though things have been restored, they're being re-restored because it was done improperly 100 years ago.
So as that newer paint that appears dark ages, it wouldn't have, I like to say in another 100 years, it wouldn't appear dark. Is
I was
that what you're
afraid
saying?
somebody was going to ask that question because I don't know the answer to that. Carmen wasn't able to give me. Carmen is our painting conservator. We've used Carmen ever since the museum opened. The Kerrs have used Carmen since before the museum opened. He's a very, very meticulous individual. The people that work for him are very meticulous, and they do excellent work. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to really answer that question for me as well. So he said, "Your guess is as good as mine."
We'll have to wait 100 years and see.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, institutions keep, we have records. Anything that we had done to a painting or work on paper in the collection, we keep the records of the conservation report, exactly what was painted,